This is the Disturbing the Peace podcast with your hosts, Justin Lanero and Reuben Stanford.
Hello and welcome to the Disturbing the Peace podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lanero, on Twitter, at Justin Lanero, along with my boy, Mr. Reuben Stanford, on Twitter, at Real Sports Porn. And our executive producer is on the line this evening, Mr. Mitchell Hurd, on Twitter, at Strongjevity. It is episode 4. We're coming at you midweek. This is a double dip this week. Got a couple things we want to talk about. Like I said, with this project, there's going to be weeks we go once. There's going to be weeks we go twice. There might be weeks we go 3 times. But we're going to come at you consistently, and that's one thing we strive to do. We got some sponsorship things in the works. Cannot talk about right now, but some big things happening. There's going to be some T-shirts in the upcoming months. Make sure you subscribe to the show. We're going to be everywhere: iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify in the near future. And Mitch, our producers, got us everywhere. We'll be on Instagram, Facebook. So we're moving at the speed of light. Mr. Stanford.
Yes, sir.
What is good in Bedford-Stuyvesant?
Oh, Bedford-Stuyvesant is everything is love. Love is love. I'm out. I'm chilling. I'm relaxing. Just got some things on my mind, and I wanted to drop it on you and see what we could talk about tonight.
Oh, good. Well, sometimes, I have another podcast, football podcast, and sometimes when I'm brainstorming through the week, when things come to our mind, it's best to write them down or put them in our phones now because 2019, and then roll with it and get it off your chest, so that you don't forget about it later in the week. Look, a lot of stuff going on now. We've touched on R. Kelly, even though we knew he was a dipshit 20 years ago.
Right.
The King of Pop, Michael Jackson, there was the Hallmark station made something on MJ. Look, this is something you and I have talked about. We're going to talk about things like this. We're going to beat these things to death. Look, I want to get your take on, as a society, do ordinary citizens have an obligation to, report acts of these, sexual predators we've seen in the past, and we can touch on all these guys. Jerry Sandusky was a big one. I was talking to you the other day about how the priests in Boston kind of open up the floodgates for the molestation, and we kind of got into that when we were on the phone the other night.
Absolutely.
People of in authority positions, well-respected people, seem to take advantage of the most vulnerable people in society, which are children. And the 3 of us have children, so it's obviously it's a very touchy subject. But what's your take? As an average Joe, so you take Jerry Sandusky. This was years ago.
Yeah, but former coach at Penn State.
Right, the former defensive coordinator at Penn State. Now, you look at Joe Paterno, who was a member of the Penn State community for what seemed like 100 years, okay?
Absolutely.
And Joe Pa was Italian. He looked like a relatable guy that you would get a slice of pizza with and have a fucking Budweiser with. And, his name, his number, and his address was in the phone book. And it wasn't what Joe Paterno did to these kids. It's what he didn't do to protect them from this monster, Jerry Sandusky. And,
right.
And what he was doing was trying to save the face of the Penn State football team, because let's face it, Brew, millions of dollars. These universities generate tons and tons of money from football. So Joe Paterno, maybe not an ordinary citizen, regular guy, puts his pants on like us, but he didn't do anything about it. So as regular Joes, are we obligated? I think, you texted me something today, moral obligation.
Yeah.
I think that you do have a moral obligation as an adult and as a parent to do something, when it comes down to sexual molestation or sexual violence. What's your take?
I totally agree with you. I think I think we've let a lot of children down. I think the idea that it takes a village to raise a child is one that we all can agree on, but I don't think we have done a great enough job as a village, to work to protect the children and to hold predators responsible for their crimes. We talked about Joe Pa and we talk about individuals that worked with R. Kelly in the past, or Larry Nassar being the USA Gymnastics national team doctor. As a doctor, you have you have a responsibility yourself to report any indications that someone is being abused. So he broke that actual trust between his patients. And when you're in law enforcement, we're trained, and we're compelled to go above and beyond to look for any incidents where we think someone is being abused. But I think that same obligation by a community, we need to step up. We need to look at how we can protect our children and where are we falling short. And I think one of the areas that we're falling short is that we've left this fourth wall up, and we just want to be bystanders, and we only want to become outraged once it's on television. I think the outrage has to start,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if people would treat every child or look at every incident as though that child is theirs, then you might get a different response. I think it's a New York City way. One of the things that people feel about New York City is when you come to the city and you ride people are not personable. We don't speak to one another, and we mind our own business. But that idea of minding our own business, it's a perfect playground for pedophiles, And I don't really know what we should do about pedophiles. Like that's another can of worms. What do we do with these people after? What do we do with R. Kelly? Like, I watched his interview. He was interviewed by Gayle King. This is his first interview that he had. I mean, he pretty much looked like he was on stage doing Trapped in a Closet. I didn't believe anything that he said. I thought it was a horrible. Yeah, I thought it was a horrible display of a person just, positioning and posturing over a woman while he's trying to, explain innocence. And I thought that it was a bad look. And but I did appreciate what Gayle did in that interview. She asked the questions that, as men and women of a community, we all want to know.
It was disgusting. And look, this just didn't come out of left field, and neither did the thing with Michael Jackson, which we'll get into in a couple seconds. I mean, we've known, as we talked about in other episodes, that R. Kelly was an absolute monster. I mean, a glorified pimp, if you will, a man in a position, a R&B legend by right. I mean, he's definitely not Prince or Michael Jackson, but in the 90s, which we're going to talk about, R. Kelly was at the top of the game. Now, he is, in my opinion, almost like a cult leader, recruiting vulnerable, down and out women, and morally corrupting them in one way or another, promising them this and just giving them that. And it's almost like he's turned them into zombies, like Charles Manson-esque. Now but the question is, Rube, and we talked about this the other day when we were touching on Michael Jackson, because now all of a sudden, Mike, there's deep conversation and specifics about what Michael Jackson was doing. He was definitely pushing the envelope as time went by with these boys. But, we're parents. I can't envision, and I'm trying to be philosophical here, saying to the kids, all right, guys, have a good weekend at Neverland. Have fun with Mike.
Right.
So the parents have some type of ulterior motive as well. And I think that could be true. It doesn't justify all the wrong that's occurring here. But if Michael Jackson, and look, something wasn't right with Mike, and it started with his old man, which we know was a monster. So, and then it gets kind of handed down, and Mike was being the monster that he was kind of created. But what are the parents doing by allowing kids to go hang out with Michael Jackson?
No, I mean, I never understood that. I think we, as parents, we have intuition, and our intuition is built on the facts that we know, and we operate based on those facts. And when you have moments where you stop and you say, well, I have to check in, or if you have that sixth sense that comes up, you should follow your sixth sense. But if you're glamored or you're wooed by what the possibilities are, because we live in a society that people are looking to move forward. People are always looking to like upward mobility, or to climb to another status or class.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So you know, when you have people that are willing to disregard all that they know about a person, you basically left your child out there vulnerable, and all you need is one person to leave a child.
Right.
You know, you don't. I'm sure there were a ton of parents that said, "No, I opt to just take my kid home, had a fun time at Neverland, and no, he's not staying." Those are when you use all your sensibilities and you follow through with your intuition, and that's what you're supposed to do. Now, the parents that didn't, they were glamored and they were groomed to want this lifestyle as just as much as the child. And I think we have made such gods of individuals in our society, and men and women, we look at regular ordinary people as gods, and we create icons, and they shine so bright. And if we can move past that in our society and just really just stop and recognize that that's just someone's job, and if your child isn't the most important thing to you, then you know
you got something wrong with you.
Yeah, something's wrong with you and you need to be checked out. So as a dad, like, I don't know. I mean, my first thought is, hey, you know, Wu-Tang Clan type torture. You know, you remember the skit? I mean, everybody start feeding them and feeding them.
So your asshole shut. Keep feeding you and feeding you and feeding you.
Right. Yep. So we know that's a reaction. That may be my initial reaction, but then, like, how does that? Is there any rehabilitation for a pedophile?
I don't think there is, and these people are, and every man, and the list goes on and on. You talk about Sandusky. This man remained defensive coordinator for 20 years at Penn State, or however long he was there, and he was one of the best defensive coordinators in the country in college football. So the question came up: why didn't he go on to aspire to be a head coach somewhere? And the fact of the matter is, he was comfortable. He was enabled. He was in his safe zone, being the shark, the animal that he was, and he had his prey in his pond at Penn State. So people, by not doing anything, people enabled him to continue the terrible behavior he did for on and on and on. Same thing with Michael Jackson and Never Neverland. Now, these are prominent figures. You know, a defensive coordinator at Penn State is a celebrity to a lot of people. I mean, Penn State is a historic football program, so we get that. This guy,
and it's linebacker linebacker you. If you were a linebacker, you wanted to go to Penn State. You wanted to go there, and you wanted to play for Sandusky because he was putting you in a position where you could go on and you could play in the NFL and you could play at the highest level. And we know that people like police officers and priests and people in your community hold positions that are very much bigger than life. And that's where, as parents, I want to find a way for the discussion for men, because I work with men, and I'm being in law enforcement. I'm working with so many men, and often a lot of my guys will, I used to be one of those guys that would make fun of situations like this. And I would say, hey, this guy had somebody, he had somebody play in his cookie jar, somebody stuck their hand in there and put the chocolate in the peanut butter. I had all of these insensitive comments that I would make about victims of sexual abuse. And I found myself being one of those people that was kind of making it difficult for people to come out and tell their truth, because I think children don't really tell their truth.
No.
Children don't really have an opportunity to tell their truth. Their brains are still developing and they're trying to figure things out. And they finally come to grips with it as an adult, and they get help, and they're so tormented. But I know I work with men, and I feel like a lot of the things that come up in our society, that it's just like 1 in 6 men have been victimized, and I just believe that to be the number is probably too low. I think it's probably more. 1 in 3 individual men have actually been victimized, but we're not going to tell anybody else. How do you tell your wife? How do you tell your friends? And what are we going to say to each other? How do we make it that the shame doesn't fall on the victim, but we actually find a way to get them to help? And I think one of the things that we have to do is, when a person does come to you, I think that first interaction, I think that first discussion that a child or an adult has with you about being abused, that's a pivotal moment, because if it goes left, if you're supportive, this trajectory can be for healing, can be amazing. And if it goes where you're just you cast doubt on that person's situation, or you shame them, or you make them feel like shit, basically, for coming out and telling you this, that they can just continue to go down a rabbit hole of depression and sadness and blame themselves for giving up a secret that they've been holding. And secrets, as we know, will kill you. So,
and then they could do it to their own kids. If it's not treated, I mean, like we've talked about with some of these animals, the victim, is victimized, and then he doesn't know any better, so he does it to his kids, and it's just this sick Freudian outlook. I mean, look at the priests out here in Boston. When the shit hit the fan with the priests, you have all these guys, and we were talking the other day, and I said to you, Rue, you were talking about religion, and a lot of the parents, a lot of religious Catholic families around here encouraging their children to be a part of the church, right? Go hang out with the priest. The priest is safe. The priest is mad close to Jesus Christ. You would think that these churches were safe houses where a kid could run, and you would think that it would be probably one of the safest places in the world, when in actuality, it was the complete opposite. So the priest found home, well, the celibacy had to take place, but they knew what they were doing. And the people that had an opportunity to put a lot of these guys in prison, some of them did go to prison, they moved them around.
They moved them around. I worked for a Catholic. I worked in the Brooklyn diocese for many years, and I watched some priests. They get snatched and they get pulled away. They get dry. You dry them out, and I mean the thing about it was, these priests that I knew, they're not like that. They're not the monsters that you would think, and you look at them and you're like, all right, well, this guy is a bad guy. No, these are really nice individuals, and I think that's the allure that we don't talk about. Like, we know that these people are these icons in our community, and they're huge in our community, like a priest, because they're doing great work. You have many parts to yourself. You can be more than just that monster. You could be that guy that is, you gave me some extra money to give my mom for some milk because you knew we were low on milk, and that made a huge difference for you and your brothers. So when you go into church and you want to be an altar boy, you want to be next to the guy that wants to be that. Who doesn't want to be next to the person that knows God in that special way? So I saw that in the Brooklyn diocese, and I also saw a priest do the perp walk, and I saw him get pushed down into the squad car because he was touching boys, and basically had adopted a kid, and it was just like all of these things, all these emotions run through me as I hear about stories like this. Like I get a weird feeling, and I get a pit in my chest because I was so close to these types of incidents. I was very close to and feeling responsible. I felt charged with what should we have done? Because I actually know the kid that this priest was allegedly, and then eventually found out to be true, that he was sexually molesting this kid. What do you do when you feel like, dag, I was around that, I was there, and I didn't pay it close enough attention? I mean, I've heard all these stories. Do we want to accuse everyone? How do we go about playing this? So that's my question for some guys and some ladies out there that, we're going to open up our.
You got to speak up. You got to speak up, right?
Yeah,
You got to take a stance. And this seems like one of the more basic things as humans that have any sense of ethics or moral fiber. You would, if you sniff it out, and you sense something's wrong. Now, look, technology is getting better. I mean, I think that there's going to be predators, there's going to be monsters, there's going to be evil, but there's cameras everywhere now. Not that I'm just saying, like, with MJ and Vassar was a few years ago. With the shit that Sandusky was doing, I mean, times are changing. I think people are getting more knowledgeable about trying to become woke, keeping your eyes open, and we see this all the time, Rube, and not just with sex acts and or sexual violence stuff, but you got to. We are, generally speaking, why I believe that we're in a society mostly of conformists and people that don't really want to take stances. People that don't want people. A lot of people want to sit on the sidelines, be comfortable, just kind of go through the motions, and they might have a certain feeling, but they don't divulge it. And that's the beauty about this podcast, because we're going to talk a lot of shit that
Right.
people are thinking.
I mean, I feel like I call people cowards. I mean, we're just a nation of a lot of people are cowards.
Absolutely.
We're scared to
blunt.
speak truth, you know?
Oh,
we're
yeah.
scared to speak the
truth. Hurts, Rube.
Yeah.
That's why they say that, look, the truth hurts. Well, why does the truth hurt? Because it's the truth and it's very uncomfortable. So that's why it hurts. Let's pivot here. And this is something we're going to talk about, and I think the lesson here is, it's and the question was, what do ordinary citizens do? Do we have a moral obligation to report acts of sexual violence? And I think that the answer is yes.
Yes.
Pretty cut and dry, especially if you're a parent, because it's obviously traumatic stuff. And Rube, if you ask me, how would you respond if something happened to one of your kids in that regard? I really don't have an answer for you. It wouldn't be pretty, and I'm sure you could attest to that as well.
Can I drop my 2 cents in the piggy bank on this one?
Absolutely.
Now, this is 100% I agree that the moral obligation, it basically should be a given. Like if a grown adult witnesses an act or their radar perks up and something starts blipping, like that should be a given. Like, yes, you step in and you protect and save the child from that situation. So that we agree with. But one of the other questions that was brought up earlier is like, how do we protect the children? And I would say we have to like reinforce their thinking. Like parents need to be proactive and like perhaps uncomfortably transparent in the conversations they have with their children. In other words, like we need to give them more credit in an effort to like enhance their mental fortitude against manipulation, so when they are confronted with someone trying to manipulate them and to open them up in that way, they see it coming. Like example given, if I'm trying to train my toddler, who will eventually be a child, to like look both ways before he or she crosses the street, or to always wait for the walking sign. Mm-hmm. If I just deliver that message once and then walk away and say, all right, just remember, always look both ways and wait for the white walking guy and then you can cross the street. If I say it once,
it's not going to resonate.
It's never going to resonate. So you got to like kind of be like hitting them over the head over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
It has
so how old are you? At what age though, Mitch? At what age do we talk?
In my opinion, it can be as young as 4 or 5 when you start having like what's appropriate touching, what's appropriate talking. Because in reality,
sooner than later, do it sooner than later.
Exactly. What's the harm in doing that? And then also getting in front of it so that they know, like, listen, no matter what happens, I am your safe place to tell anything to. And like that is a message that needs to be reinforced. I don't hear parents having that type of conversation with their 2-year-olds, with their 12-year-olds, or with their 22-year-olds nearly enough. And I think that's going to be your first line of defense and your last line of defense.
Absolutely. Now, do you think it's a smart practice? I believe it because it was something that I did with my kids, which is I used all the actual names of body parts very early.
Same.
I talked about vagina. I talked about penis. We talked about the differences in a woman's body and a man's body. And like you said, what's inappropriate and what's appropriate. And I think that goes to talking to our educators. What can we do at school? How can we implement this in a curriculum so that the kids are getting sex education a little earlier so that they're not lambs to the wolves?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So what? Then here's the question. What happens to the lamb that doesn't have stability in the home front, or is from a broken home, really broken home, a shattered home? Kids, because there are kids out there, sadly, that don't have anyone that gives a shit about them. And it would appear that a lot of these monsters find that type of prey because they know they're in vulnerable spots. They know that they don't have a Mitch, Reuben, Justin for a dad potentially to educate these kids. So they are wolves, and their prey is very, very susceptible to kind of being a puppet, and then the wolf is the puppet master. So how do you drive home the fact what should be right, what's right and wrong to a kid that doesn't have a stability on the home front at all?
I think that's when we're vigilant. I think that's when the community has to be more vigilant, because people are going to prey on the weak And that's just what monsters do. That's what predators do. And then that's when you can't have that fourth wall up and you just remain on the side of being an audience. You have to break that fourth wall. You got to intervene. You got to step over when you see a person being pulled into a car and they look like they're scared to death, or they're walking down the street with an individual and that person's clearly frightened to death. We have to have that moment of courage. You only have to show some courage for a few seconds in order to make a difference. The world is a scary place. Intervening and stepping in may not be in your best interest. And of course you need to get home, but I think I would still rather that my children look at me in a way that is honorable and respectful, to say, look, my dad always tried. My dad tried to make a difference in this world, and he's my hero, rather than, for you to live on your knees and watch people just be chewed up and spit out. So, I'm just glad we're able to have this discussion, whether you believe in what the victims were said in the Neverland documentary, or whether you stand with the survivors of R. Kelly, or wherever you stand on this issue. I think it's just important that we start having the discussion, and that's what these documentaries are doing, and that's what this Disturbing the Peace podcast is about, so that we can get more conversations and more opportunities for men to really say, hey, what is our position and where do we stand?
All right, good stuff. One more thing we're going to talk about tonight, and if they don't. Rube.
You.
So you're married. Mitch is married. I am not married. I was engaged. But we all have children. And the question I have for you tonight is, can a husband that has a bride use a condom with his wife without being suspected of cheating on her or, infidelity?
I've had this discussion with my wife before, when we were thinking about how we would continue to move forward and whether or not we wanted to have any more children. But I think that's pretty much what, married men, I would assume that married men use condoms for, not whether they to keep from having children. I think that's the way I'm not even sure if most men use condoms in a way of like, hey, I don't want to catch a disease. I don't know if that's the thinking or the thought process, as much as I don't want to have a side kid or get pregnant. So if my wife and I were to sit down and be like, oh, I'm going to start using a condom, I think that would be kind of, I don't know. I don't know if she'd look at me and that'd be a red flag. I really don't know. I think she would. I think it would.
There would be a red flag, Rube. There would be a red flag. Like, we're all of a sudden, we're just gonna. I got these Trojans,
Yeah, I just want to. Well, especially like now, if I pulled out a pack of condoms and just were like, "Yo, hey, we're gonna start doing this," that would be a red flag. I mean, if I come in with a different scent on me, my wife would know that. So I know changing up my routine with putting on a sock on would be real. That'd be crazy.
You come home with condoms, you're going to be using a sock, and you probably be screwing your hand a lot more than.
Yeah, I'll be back to my adolescence.
Damn, bro. Yeah, I mean, look, I had a vasectomy 2 years ago, and it was a funny. Well, the procedure was not funny, and because I almost dropped when he was doing it, but and I could never have kids again. I have healthy children. I'm grateful for that. So I can speak on that. I got a vasectomy, and they went in and they did his thing. I was like his last appointment, and it hurt like hell. And I had ice pack on me for a couple of days, and I'm good. I'm good to go. So I guess I shoot blanks, but I mean nothing else has changed. But I just can't have. I guess you can get it reversed as well. It was funny. A few months ago, the kids were having a meltdown. Right? You guys hear all this. I mean, my kids are always having meltdowns. They're having a meltdown at one of the local malls. And the doctor who gave me the vasectomy, I look up as I'm putting my son's shoes on, and I look up as the kids were crying. He's looking down at me, smiling. I looked up at him, and I said, "Your procedure worked." Thank God he starts laughing, and I start laughing. It worked. Thank God. Thank God.
Another happy customer.
And he walked away. And he walked away with his stick because I guess it worked. It was at the Natick Mall mixing at this place. It worked. I mean, some of these people find their way.
You start high-fiving people?
Yeah, the doctor's standing over me. Well, he's just crying his eyes out. This guy looks like Yao Ming, and he's about 7 feet tall. They're vibrant, charismatic urologist, and anybody could have been standing over me. It's the guy that snipped me, and I go, it worked. And you know me, I said that to him. It worked. And, he looks down at me and goes, good, and walks away with his kid. Another happy customer. But yeah, man. I mean, there are different ways. I mean, you come home with a condom. And after years of marriage, somebody's going to think something's up. But I mean, I get it. If you don't want to have a procedure, because it is a procedure, then you bag it up. But I think there is room for, because that could be one of the sickest things of all. You do hear it, and I have heard it before. Somebody's cheating on their wife, and they go and they catch something.
Right,
and then
they bring it home.
They bring it home, and all of a sudden the woman wakes up and, well, what's going on? I've been with you at 15, and she has some venereal disease or HIV. So it's going to bring up red flags. There are numerous options, and obviously condoms are a good contraceptive and uncomfortable contraceptive. And I think technology is probably, every time you go on the condom aisle, which, I do not, you see all these flashy red silk and lambskin and $25 condoms. And I'm still thinking in the back of my head, like, I don't give a fuck what it costs. They're still putting a balloon on you.
Yeah.
Cut your circulation. Cut your circulation off. So it's a fair question, Ruth. And, it's a question that you wanted to talk about. But, I mean, Mitch, what's your take? I mean, if you were to show up.
No. It's the handwriting, as they say, the handwriting is on the wall at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no getting around that. Although, okay, you see, Reuben has such a delicate way of delivering it. We're going to sit down and have a conversation of how, we want to proceed, and if that's the environment, then sure, it can be an option on the table.
Yeah.
And you could advocate for it and it wouldn't look shady. But yeah, you come home Thursday afternoon. Before we do this, just wait 1 second. And then you bag it up. It's looking,
It's not what you think, honey. I just want to. I have been dribbling. I've been a one pump chump the last few weeks. This will delay the process. I got this whole kit. I got this lambskin thing. That high end. It'll delay the process. So I know.
Maybe you're at the point where you're tired of popping off on the stomach, and you want to and you're like, what? I'm playing it a little close. My finances not. Some guys, I don't know. I applaud you if you go out and you go get the vasectomy and you don't want to risk it. I think that's a great move. I mean, what's his name was like that? What's the guy's name? Antonio Cromartie. He got the vasectomy. He went back. Yeah. He's got a ton of kids. So I don't know.
He's got about 20. Yeah. I mean, it does not prevent.
It's not foolproof, is it? It's not foolproof.
Oh yeah, it's about 99%. Yeah, I mean they're cutting your ball. Look at the procedure sometime on YouTube. It's you'll drop watch that. I mean, I almost hit the deck. The guy goes, I'm like, you almost done? He goes, unfortunately, we have 2 testicles, sir. So we got to do the other one. What? I'm sweating over here. I'm dying. It was just awful. But the vasectomy does not protect a venereal disease, and that's the biggie there. I mean,
right.
But so you still got to be really, really careful as to who you're sleeping with. And obviously, condoms prevent pregnancy, but they also prevent, all these sexually transmitted diseases. So it's. I would think that most married couples do not wear condoms at this point in time. But it makes sense if you don't want to have any more kids and you don't want a guy hitting you with a scalpel. But it's bombs away. So, all right. Well, this is a good show. A good show. The 3 of us will hook up Sunday. This was episode 4. Again, we can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Mitch, where else are we? PodXM.
No. I mean, that might be an app that's coming soon. It's Radio FM. Yeah, and directly on our podcast page, which the URL, it can usually be found in the description of our podcast, but to give it to you directly, it is going to be disturbingthepeace.libsyn.com. And yeah, I mean, any other, if fans have a particular podcasting platform or library they like to listen to their casts from, please do hit us on the message so we can get the podcast there as soon as possible and make it a better listening experience for you all.
All right, folks.
We'll catch up with you next week.
All right, indeed. Peace.